Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Khalil Doheny, and I'm Director of Content Marketing at Digital Niche Agency. Charles, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Khalil. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Really awesome. I'm really excited for today's webinar. It's going to be a great one. Charles, can you introduce your guest here today and kind of
Sure.
just lay out the land of what we can expect from today's webinar?
Sure. So I will allow Jat to talk a little more about who she is and where she comes from. But she and I met at a conference a few months ago, and I was super impressed, and I'm sure she was too. But at any rate, but we really enjoyed our conversation, and it was an immediate affinity, and Jat has been super helpful for us, helping us get going with Inmarsat, now Inmarsat Viasat, and she's been the prime mover. And I asked her to participate in this, in a webinar, because I knew she'd be a big draw, and I also knew that we would get some really good substance out of it that gives everyone a sense of like where this can go and how we do it and all that. So, Jat, do you want to talk a little, please?
Charles, thank you very much for that incredibly kind introduction. So I'm Jat Braich. As of about a month ago, I have recently left Inmarsat Viasat, where I was the Chief Commercial and Product Officer and then Digital Officer as well for my sins. I've been working in communications and tech businesses for most of the 30 odd years I've been working. And I get huge levels of excitement now about businesses that transform how organizations work, how they think about how they deliver for customers, and how they change operating models. So as Charles mentioned, he and I met at IoT Expo back in May out in California. And as the minute he started talking about his business, I almost fell off my bar stool, and we were in a working environment when I sat on this bar stool, and looking at my team and saying, how come I haven't met this guy before? Because the concept behind what Atombeam are doing is so easy to grasp, but it's absolutely fundamental to transforming the way communications businesses like the ones that I've been in, both terrestrial players, that global mobile and fixed line players, but also most recently in the satellite communications businesses operate. And one of the things I've been doing most recently in my last role, just before I left, was working with organizations all the way up to the scale of Microsoft and AWS to bring AI, to bring advanced technologies to bear, to take startups similar to Atombeam into new arenas, to help them grow more aggressively, to open doors, to make sure those opportunities that Charles and his team have been delivering against for a number of years actually get a bigger hearing, a bigger audience, and an acceleration. So delighted to be here today. Really looking forward to hearing from the team and the questions you may have in the audience.
Great. Well, thank you, Brett. Thanks, Jad. I really appreciate that. It is great to have you, and I know it's late there in London, so or near London.
Early evening. So very good.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, so I've got a deck, and as usual, I will do a little screen share here and get going on it. Hang on. Is that the right one? There we go. Okay. All right. So Jad already introduced herself, and so unless there's something you want to add, we'll keep going. So wanted to sort of organize it this way. I'm going to talk a little. This is kind of how I usually do it, as many of my faithful viewers will agree, is give you a little bit on what's going on and everything right now. And then we'll dive into the main subject here, which is sort of big picture. What is Atombeam's compaction and also NIRCom AI? What do those things mean in the real world, longer term? What's the potential? How do we get there? So first, though, I'm going to talk a little about what's going on. So we have 2 phase 2 contracts. Each one's $1.2 million right now. They are both really cooking now. One of them was slow to start, and that was what's called the Space Development Agency, the SDA. they are all over us, ready to do things with us. They are doing things with us, and they have a specific requirement that is moving data. They're getting uplinked to these satellites 16 gigabits, and they have capacity to downlink 1 gigabit per second. And that's a problem if you would like to get 16 gigabits and you're only getting 1. And it's just meat to us. It's exactly the kind of data that we like to do. It's telemetry. So and the guy keeps waving money at us and saying, look, I've got a bunch of money. I want to give this to you. If you guys can solve this problem, I'm all over it. And so and he's not like officially, this is like a 21 months contract. He says, whatever, just get this done, get it done as fast as you can. And, if you can get it done in 2 months, then great, then we'll move to phase 3. So he's all over this. And he's also pushing it out so that the rest of the Space Force knows about us. That's gone from like, we're okay, come on, wake up. You guys signed a contract. Let's get going, to now it's suddenly, 100 miles an hour. The other contract is with the Air Force Research Laboratory, which is part of the U.S. Air Force. They are focused on the other product, the NERCOM AI product. And that is also going really well. It's different because this is an earlier product. We're still developing it and everything, but the bottom line is that for the kinds of data, the kind of images, that is like synthetic aperture radar images, LiDAR, point cloud, it's called, things that you ping something and then you wait and see how long it takes to come back. Now, it'll work with other things, the AI that is involved with this, but that's where we're starting. And we get 2 times what standard compression gets. That is to say, the standard performance of state-of-the-art compression on these images is about a 30-to-1 ratio. Now that's lossy as opposed to lossless, which is what compaction is. But this is standard. You have to do that with images. So, but it's okay. You can still be very readable. But the bottom line is that instead of getting 30-to-1, we get 62-to-1, and we think we're going to get better. And they're like really excited about it and see all sorts of uses. So that one is going well. That's not going to go to phase 3 anytime soon. It might be end of next year. It might be, something like that, to be my best guess. And then we're also submitting a phase 2 proposal for putting it on a chip. Now, we've done a phase 1, very successful. Lots of people are interested and excited. Everybody knows that we're working on, I think most people know, we're working hard on putting our stuff, our compaction into the cloud, into AWS, into Microsoft Azure. And those will be up and running end of next month. Then we need to refine them, make them faster and better and everything. But the thing that's really important, especially for defense, is being able to move data point to point, which means from an airplane to a ship or something, but not to the cloud necessarily, maybe eventually, but not initially, which means that we need some way of making it work easily, quickly. I pull out one logic board and I push in another logic board. That's the deal. And that is why we're focused on the FPGA, which is, again, a field programmable gated array, which just means a programmable chip. That is going to be where we're going. And the whole thing there is initially it'll just have compaction on it. We'll have another version that has both compaction and NERCOM AI on it. That is going to be killer, because not only will it apply to DoD, it'll apply to everything commercial too. And then on the this side of things, on the commercial side, we've had, literally dozens of big companies who've expressed strong interest in using our stuff. it just hasn't been easy for them to do it. It's software. People are not used to dealing with, here's software. They want a SaaS. So we focused on SaaS. We will be releasing an early version of it end of next month. It'll get refined, automated, and so forth. And in Q1, it'll get much more refined. It'll get much more automated and quick and easy to use and automatic, and push a button and it's going. But the key thing that's allowed us to make this kind of fast progress has been Jat, who has made sure that the people that her people at Viasat, Inmarsat, and AWS have worked on our stuff very actively and pushed it and made sure that things didn't drift and everything, because even when they did, everybody got flogged and it happened again and they got going. So Jat, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key there is, as Charles has set out very clearly, the technology is exciting. You wouldn't get the kind of interest that Charles and the team have developed to date if it wasn't. The key now, and this is particularly where I think I have been able to help and want to continue helping, is the more you get it used, the more you embed it in good, secure customer bases, the faster you get to revenue, the faster you get to valuation multiple drivers. So the model moving from a pure software product to a SaaS-based model works on a number of levels. You get contracted revenue over a long period of time, which is good for investment security as the business is still growing. But that secured revenue also goes straight to the multiple. People like to see that secured revenue basis. I'm sure this audience will recognize and appreciate. So by using the likes of AWS and Microsoft Azure in particular, but also looking across the other partners I had in the ecosystem I was supporting previously at Viasat, there were a lot of relationships where we could take the product as it was and get people excited about it. The transformation now is to, whilst the product is evolving, is to get the adoption up quickly, seamlessly, to make the adoption of future iterations and releases part of the DNA of these growing companies, because as they grow, Atombeam will grow.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's well said. I mean, and again, you know, everybody here should bow down to Jat, because she's made this happen. And we would not be making this good progress otherwise. Yeah, we'd be making progress, but it's not the same as getting the high level attention we've got. And that's really, you know, again, it's when we have now got a very dedicated, this is all they do, production group. And those guys are focused only today on the SaaS. Anything else is being handled either by sales engineering, there's one guy there right now, or by the sort of R&D focused, which is, you guys have met Josh Cooper before, you've met you know, Zhu Li before, and now we have two engineers, you know, working in Bolivia who do skunkworks projects that are basically things that are driven by what the market wants. So we're doing a lot of work now, but there's a clear division between the ones that are doing the production and the ones that are doing projects that are speculative. And that is how we're going to knock this out. And as Jat was saying, that is how we get valuations, by getting a product out there that's saleable, that's commercialized, and getting some revenues going. So I nominally have oil and gas and ag here, but, you know, it's like where we're targeted. But ultimately, what matters much more are the partnerships, because, you know, people, by and large, unless it's a really big enterprise, but mostly even then, it's going to be, people are going to buy our stuff via a partner. You don't buy, you know, you're not going to be mostly buying Atombeam. You're going to be buying a satellite connection. You're going to be buying a gateway or something that has us in it, rather than, or, you know, sending your data to the cloud and it's getting there because we're connected and we're in the thing that's connected. So that's how this is going to go forward. Now, and from the perspective of the technology, we don't care what it is. I mean, so long as it's got patterns in the bits, it could be, your refrigerator's temperature or the nuclear codes. It's all one. So anyway, so that's a key thing for us, is like the partnerships. And yeah, we can say oil and gas and ag because we have lots of interest from guys who do those things, but also cars and also all sorts of other things. I've talked about this 18-month plan before. And it really comes down to breaking it into two basic chunks. First one is the first 6 months, which is really getting the SaaS up and running, getting commercial revenue rolling, trying to get the SDA to get to a phase 3 and raising the big money. Then after that, we'll be able to take it to the next phase. The next phase is going to be driven by customers saying, I really want this feature. And we're gonna hear about these things they want first, earlier than a year or 6 months from now or whatever. But the big focus there will be releasing the features into Compaction and releasing NERCOM AI, getting bigger traction, having more people to do more things, like mainly in sales and engineering. That's where most of this will be. So again, first 6 months, you got to get off the ground. We got to focus, and we are. And the SaaS is the answer to that, along with the DoD work. But that's the big focus in terms of engineering. And then after that, it's whatever the market says we need to do, that's what we're going to do. But all the time thinking, okay, how do we maximize our value at the end of that 18-month period? That's going to drive all the decision making. Now we're going to move on. And that's kind of like, okay, that's what we're working on. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's very cool and exciting. But let's talk a little about, because we have Jat here, to talk about sort of like what this really implies. I mean, because you could say, okay, it's cool that you can take pretty much any machine-to-machine communication and send 4 times more data over the same pipe. That's huge right there. But that's only one dimension of a lot of dimensions. And how do we think about this? What is the potential for it? And also, how do we organize ourselves to address all that? Now, I've talked about the 18-month plan, and I think that's a good way of generally organizing it. But thinking about it in terms of like, you can't just be tactical. You've also really got to think about things from a big time strategic, what is this, can this do perspective. And that is where we're going to go when we really think about the next step. So if I could ask you, Jat, to sort of like jump in here and talk about whatever, and you don't feel constrained by the slides at all. Just I was hoping I could put things together so it would, give us some.
No, it's beautifully set up. Thank you very much, Charles. I think Charles has hit the nail on the head. One of the challenges I've seen in organizations at this stage in their development throughout my career is that there's no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of curiosity about how the core product, core innovation can be applied. The challenge is picking a few bets and going after them really ruthlessly to the point where they take hold, they create momentum, and they can look after themselves. It does have this horrible sense that you're leaving other things behind. But in reality, what you're doing is proving a use case to the point where you get credible market share in 1 or 2 areas where once that is up and running and it's growing, the read across to additional verticals is much easier. Where I see organizations go wrong in this space, and as I say, I've been sort of looking at this from both terrestrial and non-terrestrial communications businesses for the best part of 3 decades now, is they try to be all things to all people, because the absolute size of this market, if you take the applications into industrial IoT, we're talking tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. and everyone wants that share. I've worked for organizations, been talking about taking a slice of that share successfully and not so successfully for most of my career. The ones that actually do really well are the ones that pick a bet. They pick a horse and they go after it. Now, what my team and I were able to do at Viasat, and they will continue to support Charles even though I've left, is with the likes of AWS and Azure, is define that core kernel of products that can be targeted at a particular sector, deliver against its needs, build up a momentum so it can then be sold very easily through digital marketplace, which Viasat have in place, and they will continue to evolve and develop over the coming months to support the adoption of these kind of products. But once you've got that core product, the adaptation then to other verticals is much slicker, it's much faster. The only other thing I'll add is that I've seen a huge number of organizations that spent a huge amount of time perfecting their product, trying to make sure it's just going that extra 2 or 3% to be almost close to the perfect solution. Invariably, when they launch, they find out that customers wanted something that they had ready 3 or 4 iterations ago. So Charles, poor chap, gets nagged by me on a regular basis to say, it doesn't need to be 80%, it doesn't need to be 100%, it needs to be 51%. So more than enough to say that you won't regret taking it out to the market and getting feedback. And I see, particularly with the partnership with AWS, technology experience where these guys have been there and done it before. So a lot of experience to draw on, but also a commercial discipline, which is the sort of phase that Charles and his team are now moving into, that says, let's make this far too well-kept secret less of a secret. Let's get out into the market. Let's show what we can do. There's some good patterns in place, but let's be open. Some of this technology will be replicated elsewhere. The key here is to go out there and be the first market mover, take that advantage, win those really important clients, and know that they will trust you to innovate ahead of the market. That's where you are at the moment. That's where you need to stay for the future.
Very good. Yep. No, 100% agree with that. I think one of the things that I think we can do now with SaaS coming out and this series of other products, or not just other products, but more features, more automation, simplicity. That is, I mean, when you look at the challenges that we have operationally, it's really much more around being able to say, here it is in an easily usable form. And then saying, here's another thing, another feature of this in another easily usable form. It all comes down to the easily usable in most cases, because that is what the world is now. I mean, it's not about, tinkering with engineering. It's about, you've already done that. Give me the thing that's on the end. So anyway, one thing I wanted to mention here quickly is like, just the size of this thing. I mean, and just focusing on the IoT, because, there's no doubt that the images and all the other stuff is even more, but we really, again, as Jat was saying, you got to focus, you got to stay on the beam. And the way you do that is you say, okay, we're about this, and okay, maybe later we're add more things, but we're about this. And the number of devices depends how you read, right? And this is the number of connected devices. And IoT Analytics says in 2025, I don't know, what does it say? Like 22 billion, and IDC says there's going to be 56 billion, whatever. It's a lot, and it doesn't really matter what it is. And also, do you count a car as one thing, or all the gadgets in the car as something, is a lot of things, whatever, So another thing that really impacts us is real time, because if you don't have an urgency to send information somewhere, then you can use compression because you can wait a day or something. But guess what? The world is not that way increasingly. And this is probably a modest estimate of what, okay, I've got to have it real time versus, boy, it'd be great to have it real time, which is kind of two concepts. And
Charles, if I could just step in and add a couple of comments to the last two charts you showed, because I had fortuitously a couple of conversations today that just echo the point you're trying to make. The first was with a CFO of a global listed business, about $6 billion worth of revenues in supply chain. They have 320 million individual assets that they want to track. And it doesn't have to be real time for their particular business. But if you think about the data processing, capturing costs for an organization with that number of assets who want to digitize, who want to take advantage of this advanced ability to monitor assets, reroute more effectively, lower operating costs, that one business alone could make or break an organization in terms of its opportunity value here. The second conversation was a lady who I've known for a number of years who was the original brains, and I will call her that on purpose, behind the connected vehicle for the Volkswagen Group. So that's the Porsche, it's the VW, it's the Skoda brands on a global basis. And that's where real-time really does matter, because one of the most easy to understand applications of real-time communications and industrial IoT for vehicles is the moment you crash and you need an emergency signal sending out. And particularly having worked with a satellite communications provider most recently, 10% of the Earth's surface is connected by the types of connectivity we're all used to, be it fixed line or mobile. 90% of the Earth's surface is not covered by those core connectivities. That's where satellite comes in. And one of the key reasons I'm really keen to support Charles in his business is without that ubiquitous connectivity and the right quality of service, the advantages that he and Atombeam can deliver are compromised, because it's no good being really good when you are connected. You have to be really good and be connected. So you need that underlying infrastructure, which is that seamless connectivity. And it's something that I know Viasat are looking at very, very heavily, my former employer, but also the likes of Deutsche Telekom. And equally, just to echo the sort of the change in the adoption of thinking here, which will again support the growth of Atombeam. The FCC made an announcement back at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona back in March of this year, where they understood the way that they allocate spectrum, which enables communication businesses, had been thinking about satellite and terrestrial communications as if they were completely divorced things. Now, most of you on this call will be aware of the likes of the T-Mobile deal, where they're working with satellite providers to provide connectivity across the US, where it's too expensive to roll out physical infrastructure in the way that they would for a city. Similarly, Apple and Globalstar, and there are others happening, more technologies this like coming. All of that enables the greater adoption of the kind of technology that Charles and his team are playing with.
And so, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the guys that worked for Jat is still there. Many of them are, but one of them that I was connected to and been talking to, I mentioned to him in an email the other day, as I found the Globalstar, we know had received a $252 million loan from Apple for the purposes of developing satellite constellations around the use for Apple devices, mainly iPhones. And nominally, it's for emergencies, but of this constellation, 85% of it is to be allocated for use by Apple devices. Does that sound like emergencies only? I mean, I don't think so. And so my point there is, I think this is going to be a bigger and bigger thing. Are you most likely in the early stages, at least, only sending texts and so forth and that kind of thing? Yeah, probably. But over time, the capacity will grow and the bandwidth will get greater, and the number of users and all that will grow, etc. And there's going to be a lot of uses out there for just regular old handheld devices that can access a satellite. And
so just to echo that point, Charles, I was in negotiation, and this is okay to share, but there's a limited amount I can share, with the likes of Apple, Google, and others. They have hundreds of engineers working on this. They're not just doing that for emergency messaging. Equally, one of the prime reasons why Mark Dankberg, who's the founder and continues to run Viasat, for acquiring Inmarsat, where I worked, was the L-band spectrum, which is particularly useful for direct-to-device, as we call it, connectivity of satellite communications to traditionally mobile devices, be it handheld devices for voice calls, or be it IoT connectivity. So this underpinning of what is required to make sure your business can grow, it's happening. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. It's well in advanced stages. You may not see it yet, but the market is moving quickly.
And it's crystal clear that we have a play there, because, I mean, okay, you know, you launch this many satellites with X capacity, and most of the data is stuff that we can do. You're gonna, it depends on the data, 2-4 times more capacity in effect if you have loaded those devices with, you know, the Atombeam compaction. It's really that simple. And just the sheer amount of data is just, you know, getting big. All that stuff, all this data, even if it isn't ultimately stored, is still, because all of it won't be stored. Most of it won't be stored, but lots of it just it all has to move, and it's got to move from here to there. And that's our biggest play. And so the IDC, which is the guys who did this, estimate in 2025 that 90 zettabytes is going to be generated by IoT devices. And just to give you a sense of scale, all of the data centers in the world, their total storage capacity is about 2 zettabytes. And so 90 zettabytes is more than that. And it isn't like they're going to store it all, but it is like all this stuff has to move from here to there. And that's where we can be a significant player. You know, the other thing that's sort of the same point in a different perspective is to say, okay, increasingly, you want to do more in the cloud that you possibly can. But the limitation of that is to say, instead of doing a lot of computing at the edge, you'd rather do it in the cloud. That's a big thing where we hear it all the time and all that. But the issue is you have to get the data from the thing to the cloud so you can do the compute, and then send the information back and say, stop, or whatever you're trying to do. And that means the data has to move faster and more of it has to move. And that's all good for us, is all that boils down to that. That's it. So if you look at that, you'd say, you know, where in the future should everybody focus? Should they focus on making more devices and making more storage? You're going to store, whether we've compacted it or whether it's compressed, you're going to store similar amounts. It doesn't really change things. It's big that ours is searchable, but that's a different issue. But in terms of handling this massive amount of data, this 90 zettabytes of data that's generated by machines, moving it around, the issue is the pipes. It's not the storing it. In terms of like how we address everything, it's really about partnerships. It's like I said, you can't go there. You can't, we're not like a lot of businesses that create an app, you go download it, and now you're watching like somebody like a tomato dance or something. But, you know, we're not that. We're the gadget, we're the Intel Inside gadget. And that makes partnerships vital. And the most important one we have, no doubt about it, is the Viasat Inmarsat partnership. And that's how we're going to get the commercial revenue rolling, and how, you know, we're going to drive value and everything. It's being in the thing. Jat, do you want to comment on partnerships generally? You think good places for us to go and so forth?
Yes, certainly, and credit to my former colleague Tim Daly, who introduced us, who helped set us off
100%.
on this path. Let me take a step back. I'm a great believer in partnerships for a number of reasons. I've worked for a number of very innovative, well-funded, fast-moving organisations. It's been in my DNA throughout my career. However, no business is credible in all functions that actually appeal to markets. Usually there is a particular strength that an organisation has, and I see the most successful organisations I've ever worked with, directly or indirectly, focus on those and really exploit them. I often see organisations trying to be all things to all people, and they engage in trying to build an ecosystem completely in-house and make everything their own, build up technical or operational barriers to keep customers with them. I call that customer detention rather than customer retention, and I believe in an open marketplace. I think both for speed of delivery and focus, partnerships are vital. You want people to concentrate on the things they're really good at. So when I first initiated partnerships with the likes of Azure and AWS, the rationale was no one was going to take Viasat and Inmarsat seriously as the guys who were going to collect, process, and store their data against the behemoths of a Google Cloud or an AWS and others. So rather better that I work with them. And it paid off immediately. There were an awful lot of customers who were storing their data with these behemoths, generating huge amounts of operational credits, and didn't have a way of actually using them to actually then deploy that data in a meaningful way, which is where we came in. Not only collecting that data, but processing it real time on a reliable basis in the remotest corners of the world. So, Charles mentioned agri-tech as a potential opportunity here. We have organisations that cover some of the remotest aspects of agriculture on the planet. And as a result of satellite technology, they're now able to improve yield and improve sustainability of crops, but also sustainability of life on the planet through the use of remote monitoring, which is where things like the technology came in. Now, we could provide that connectivity. We've been doing it for over 40 years as Inmarsat, and it's part of the reason why Viasat acquired us. The key there is actually what you do with that data. How do you use it? How do you process it? How do you intelligently deploy it? That's where the partnerships with the hyperscalers came in. I took that principle, and Charles has been part of the beneficiary of that, when I actually picked up the enterprise unit in what was legacy Inmarsat, is now Viasat, which was focusing on industrial IoT. And as Charles has just explained, massive growth opportunity, huge amounts of investment going in, huge numbers of assets that can be connected for the greater good to improve operating costs, improve commerciality of organisations, but also deliver a sustainable good for the planet as a whole. And I found three things. The first was there was an awful lot of startups, and they need money and they need customers. So Charles was not unique in that sense. The second was they needed an acceleration of their growth strategy. And the third is they needed some confidence that other people bought into their model. And the partner ecosystem that I was working with and I accelerated in Viasat, and now is part of the Elevate program that Viasat runs, but also just part of the DNA that the likes of Bruno Despinay, who Charles works with very closely, of fostering, brings together all of those aspects together with the opportunity for funding. So one of the things I started just before I left, which I'm now continuing on a private basis, is getting some institutional investors together to actually fund some of these businesses. So if I give you, again, a link to the agri-tech opportunity, there is a huge opportunity here to improve the sustainability of food production. So the UN estimated that by 2050, food production globally would need to increase by 50% in order to meet the world's needs. Now, that isn't going to happen. What you can do, though, is improve the yield of existing crops across the planet. And remote monitoring and using of compaction to lower the cost of that remote monitoring and improve the actions that are taken. You add Charles's technology alongside AWS, who can remote manage that data and send out intelligence signaling, with the connectivity that Viasat and others can provide, and you get a sustainable solution that can be easily funded by the underdeployed ESG funds across the planet. So, as I say, I see huge amounts of value in partnership. I don't think we need to be all things to all people. I really do believe you need to be exceptionally clear on where you're adding the defining value as part of that value chain.
100%. Yep. Yep. Any vagueness is killer. You've got to be able to say to somebody, here's what you, and not just generally, but here's what you specifically will get out of this. And if you can say that, which is big hump we got over with the SDA recently, the Space Development Agency of Space Force, is that we went from them saying, well, this is a great idea, sure, we'll fund it, to we have this specific problem and we need you to solve it. That's the big deal. So just really quickly, one of the things that you had mentioned when we first met at that conference was how much you thought you could save in infrastructure you were spending, when it came to this. And that's, again, going back to, it's about the pipes, not the hard drives. So if you want to elaborate here, feel free.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one because both in terrestrial communications, where I started my career, and most latterly in the non-terrestrial space satellite, the model has been about how much volume of stuff can we transport, and if we're transporting that stuff, we also need to store it. The key here is to make sure you're actually only really adding cost to an organization where it's adding value to someone, because otherwise what you're doing is putting an additional cost on a P&L. It's a hard sell and it's not sustainable. So we have to sort of move the models on, and I've sort of spent most of my career annoying people who just want to build more and more satellites and launch more and more satellites and capacity in data centers. I used to run a business where we rented out data center space. This is completely an anathema to that. The key here isn't about the amount of data that you're collecting. It's about how you use the data in the most effective way. So if you can lower the peripheral costs, which is the collection and storage and the processing of that data, to focus on what that data actually enables you to do, to differentiate your impact in the way you run your business, the way you deliver value to your customers, that's where you get a sustainable business. The kind of models where the telcos that I worked with 10, 15 years ago charge you more the more you use. If you just take your cell phone bill, that kind of model has disappeared because people just want to be connected. They want to be able to access the apps that they need to live their life wherever they are as seamlessly as possible. It's almost a human right in parts of the world to have connectivity, be it Wi-Fi or 4G or 5G. That shows you where the market's going, the applications to a B2B world. Probably a little bit slow on the uptake here, but again, even the hyperscalers understand charging for the number of servers that are used, the amount of processing power that's used. That's interesting, but it's not the differentiator. The differentiator is how does that then create value that makes your business more efficient, more effective, more competitive, gives you the edge, allows you to get answers to customers faster than the competition. And that's where we need to go to. Going away from a traditional, can I take money from you because you're doing lots of stuff, which drives the address to creating data. Data is power. Yeah, if it costs you a lot to collect it and process it, what you're going to do is actually reduce the amount of data you're collecting. Data is insight. Getting to a point where that is economic to be collected, processed, and used is where Atombeam step in.
Right. No, I agree, and I completely sign up. I mean, it's really a question of saying, all right, if we can fundamentally, and we've got to be, again, specific, if we can fundamentally drive some value and we can demonstrate it. I mean, for us, yeah, the simplest, quickest, easiest thing, and therefore the first thing that we're doing is going to people who are thinking about a satellite creating a satellite uplink, need to send their data over satellites, but it's too expensive. Okay, here's a way of doing it cheaper. That's pretty simple, easy, but there's lots and lots and lots of other things that go well beyond sort of like we save money on the cost of sending it. It's like there are all these things with oil and gas. It's hard to get much information up from downhole. It's hard to, there's all sorts of things that are hard to do. But this is the thing that's happening with us right now is we need to move from we need to have a very specific thing that we're targeting, which we're doing, and then we need to keep coming up with more things that are specific and targeted as we go. So, I think I definitely want to give us time to answer some questions. So, Khalil, do you
Yeah, I
have
was just going to bring that up. We have about 15 minutes left in the
fire away. I will stop this and we'll talk questions.
All right. First question that I see here is, could NeuroCom be used in cloud gaming to reduce the size of textures that get sent over the network?
Yeah, probably. First things first, but it could be compaction will work for that too, because it's fundamentally, got patterns in it. So it's been something that has sat out there, but we haven't really focused a lot of time and attention on it. No reason why not, put it that way.
And then how will the SaaS product be priced initially, and how will that change, if at all, as more features are added?
Yeah. So the idea is to try to capture something like 15% of the savings, but there's a lot of buts in that, because if you were to say, okay, I was going to spend whatever, say you were going to spend $1 million on sending data, right, over over a satellite or whatever. Now you can spend $250,000, and so your bill is $250 from the satellite company. Are we really going to get whatever 15% of 250? Because they're going to say, "Are you crazy? That's almost as much as I'm spending to send the data." You know what I mean? So it's like it's a hard problem pricing this stuff, because there's two things going on. One, it's so different between like sending terabytes out of an airplane versus sending a few blips out of a gadget that's attached to a goat in Western Australia or something, because and I'm serious about that, because a guy just talked to me about that when I was in the London thing, or maybe it was cows, whatever, but it was something. Then they were blipping things to a satellite out of a cow,
It
it
was
is.
cow.
So there you go. So I can't charge the same thing for the airplane as I charge for the cow, but it's one thing. So it's a combination of like how much data is going and the number of things, but it's also not confined to just saving money. You can't say, okay, it's a percentage of the amount. You say, well, what if you're not saving any? What if it's just about, okay, now you can do this thing you couldn't do before? So we have been doing work on that. We have actually one of the guys here who's one of the investors in crowdfunding and our Start Engines thing, who's been helping us. He's an expert in pricing, and so, but it's a freaking difficult problem, because like you got to price it low enough that you get fast acceptance, but you can't standardize. It's impossible. And you just we have to like hire experts, do the best we can, and figure it out as we go. And not a very good answer, but it's the best I can do.
And then this question is for Jat. What is your excitement level about all of this?
The technology will happen, right? And again, I have no doubt about that. I think that's where my energy came from the first meeting with Charles back in May. It won't be Atombeam alone, because it's sensible, smart, commercially valid technology. The application of it and actually picking the key markets is where my excitement comes from. So Charles can testify to the amount of time I spend nagging him about when are we going to market, when are we going to monetize it, which segments are we going to go after.
Not
because
just
the
say
answer is
whatever, you know. children.
yeah, he knows how impatient I am.
Right.
So my excitement is about the fact I can see this coming. I've seen parallels throughout my career. So knowing it's going to happen and wanting Charles and his team to be at the forefront of it and defining their own future, that's where my excitement comes from.
There we go. Is Insight Terra using an automated version of Atombeam, or is it similar to what the SAS v1.0 will be? How hands-on do they have to be for 85% compaction?
Okay, that's interesting. So that person has been reading, because at the, just so everybody knows, at the conference in London, I was on a panel along with the CEO of Insight Terra, and Insight Terra, and somebody asked a question and about how much resource we use and stuff, and I told them about it, and then Alistair, my buddy Alistair, the CEO of Insight Terra, piped up and he said, well, you know, we've been using this over a year from site in Chile, and it's saving 85%, and it really works and everything. And everybody goes, you could hear the, you know, in the room, which is great, because this isn't just Charles Yeomans talking. This is somebody who's actually using it, you know. So, all right, no, they're not using anything weird particular. Actually, they're using an older version. We have new, improved. It's probably a little better reduction ratio. They put it in their own system. It's not in the SAS that we're building now. But it's, you know, you got to understand, like, taking our stuff and putting it in the SAS is taking something that exists as a software and does its thing into a different environment, but it's doing the same thing. It's the same software. So irrespective of any other consideration here, it's the same thing. It's just a question of whether it's doing it on a server at AWS or doing it in their server.
And then this question says, not clear on whether the satellite applications run off Atombeam in the cloud or whether the software has to be developed separately.
So, you know, so the way the satellite is, in most circumstances, it may not be even the SDA, but in most circumstances, the satellite is the network. You know, it's whatever it is, say it's a tractor in a field in Brazil, sending data from the tractor, and it gets compacted there on the tractor, sent up, and the satellite takes it and sends it back down. And then when it gets to where it's going, it's sent to a downlink, and then the downlink sends it on to the cloud, and the cloud is where it's decompacted. So it's really, you know, like the SAS is where it's going to go, but, you know, fundamentally it's coming from the gadget.
Then do you have your sights set on a particular source for that 10 million raise next year? Thanks for another great presentation.
Oh, sure. Thanks. You know, no, I just talked to another venture firm yesterday. We talked to another source of capital this morning. I don't know where it's going to come from. I can tell you that I think when we start knocking out some commercial revenue, it will be very doable. He chose his words carefully, to find a significant round of capital. I think the level of interest we already have, well, even before we really hit significant commercial revenue, is a lot. But when we start knocking out, I think, you know, we're going to be able to find the money. I think it seems very likely.
And will Viasat become a revenue stream at some point?
Could be. So if it's a revenue stream, it's essentially taking the margin model for a connectivity provider and saying, actually, you need to use less of your capacity, your processing power to provide the service you're providing today, and you take that as a margin opportunity. I think the bigger opportunity that both Charles and I agree on is actually the Viasat community, the connections, the industries that we're connected to, that creates the markets, that creates the customers. So Insight Terra, for example, was actually spun out of Inmarsat as a separate entity, and Alistair and others who lead that business were former Inmarsat colleagues. So it will drive revenue into the organization without doubt.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then what's the timing redeveloping the SaaS product once done? Any lag to then be offered commercially?
No, the point of doing it is to offer it commercially. So the big thing will be initially version 1.0 or version 0.1, whatever it is going to be, involve more customization and engineering work to get somebody up and running. But all those functions are going to get automated, and they're already working on the automation pieces, but they can't release them until they're fully baked. And so initially there'll be more stuff that somebody has to do to onboard. We already have, thanks again to Jat, a bunch of distribution partners, especially a couple of big ones who distribute satellite connectivity. That's the main way that satellite that Viasat, I know Inmarsat derives most of their revenue from their distributors. Distributors are kind of
the organization. Yeah.
Go ahead, you please. I mean,
no, sorry. I was just going to say, for this part of the organization, industrial IoT is their focus. Neither Inmarsat or Viasat really played directly. We worked with distribution partners. So again, as Charles just touched on, one of the key things to do was actually introducing to people who would absolutely help them to monetize this.
Right.
And then are you going to be relying strictly inbound requests, or will there be an outbound sales team targeting good fits?
Mostly it's going to be business development, through partnering, direct, yes, because we get people reaching to us. But most of the way we'll be able to address those opportunities is by saying, okay, this is something we should go back to Viasat and tell them about. And we're doing that right now. And so, yeah, I mean, there's probably things that giant corp that like you would take like a big car company, we work with them directly because, they're worried about moving their data from here to there, from a car to the cloud and blah, blah, blah. But most of the time it's going to be, we'd be working with a telematics provider for the cars, for example.
Awesome. And as we start to wrap up here, Charles, is there anything else you would like to, leave the viewers with?
Just, come on in and invest in the freaking company, and hurry up, because I don't know how long we're going to leave this out there. We'll see.
Yeah. Anything else from you?
Just a quick comment on that investment point, because I saw one of the questions about whether or not I was personally invested. I left my employer a month ago. When Charles and I first met, I think it was within the first 5 minutes, I said, how do I invest? I'm not here for fun. I see a number of organizations, as you can imagine. I currently have no investment.
No, right?
Yeah, I currently have no investment. I'm interested, otherwise I wouldn't be putting my time here. We've got work to do, as Charles knows, but again, I think there are opportunities here. And if I'm comfortable with how those play out, and that's a conversation that Charles and I will have, I will put my money where my mouth is. And I look forward to doing so.
All right.
And I know we didn't get to everyone's question today. So if you do have a question that you'd like to get answered, please add it into Start Engine. There's a
discussion section of Start Engine, of our site in Start Engine.
Correct. Thank you, everyone who attended the webinar today. If you weren't able to attend, the webinar has been recorded this whole time. As always, we will be posting a recap around the webinar, so stay tuned for that.
Yep, and it'll be in the Atombeam YouTube channels. So subscribe, that's what they always say. You have to subscribe, so there you go. I've done my ad.
There we go.
Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you, Jat, for taking the time also.
Thank you for the invitation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.